Just as a quick background, I'm in Southern California right now. I'm a volunteer both at the parish and diocese level, and I love pilgrimage. I'm a retired Air Force officer who spent some time with Maryknoll lay missioners in Brazil after leaving the Air Force. But after my husband and I were retired from the Air Force, and before we went to Brazil with Maryknoll, we had the time to do the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage in Spain. And there were a lot of lessons out of that sort of settled on me over the years. But one thing we both already knew that we loved walking. We both were journeying toward our new mission with Mary Knoll in Brazil, and we learned a lot about simplicity on the route. We learned a lot about praying and trying to pay attention to God while we were walking. And so when this initiative came about, I said, well, I hope I can help share some of that. I've been doing creation care ministry in Laudato Si for about 5 years now, so hopefully that all matches together. But just a little bit of background why the heck I'm here with you guys here today. So as Alyssa said, we are hoping that I might be able to present a little bit about what we call the nuts and bolts, more detailed planning. And we thought that the best way to do this, since there are so many different pilgrimage options, as she mentioned, mild, medium, and spicy, was to sort of go through what can look like a long list of considerations. And I know that many of you all have done things like this before, so please don't take any of this as anything except an attempt to try to be somewhat thorough on it. But we thought that maybe doing it by storytelling, by kind of telling where we are with our pilgrimage that we hope to do in November, might be helpful. So anyway, with that slide, I guess. So considerations, um, we hear that Jesus is the way, right? And in Spain, they call the Camino the way. So I just thought it might be appropriate to title the slides the way. But anyway, when it comes to considerations, you're going to have a starting point. That's pretty obvious. You're going to have consideration of how far you can reasonably go, whether you're going for an hour or for 3 days, and you're going to have an ending point. And so I just add some questions on here, which I think are really important things to consider and really to reflect on with other people. You might have a pilgrimage where people are just going to show up when you start it, and so you might not have the chance to prepare with them, but you're probably going to have a planning group, and these questions are worth thinking about and reflecting on together. But both the physical and the spiritual aspect of this, where are you starting in both of those ways? How far can you reasonably go? And then what's your ending point in that? And just from a physical perspective, my advice is about 2 to 3 miles. If you're doing an on-foot pilgrimage, this one is on foot, about 2 to 3 miles per hour. Take lingering breaks so you can hang out. This is not a marathon or a 10K or any kind of a race. This is a journey. And then I would say somewhere between about 10 to 15 miles a day is probably reasonable. And I think personally 11 to 12 is ideal. And you can do 15. It's the human body, I'm convinced, is meant for walking. So then the way, discerning the route itself, again, spiritually and physically, can you plan your path to try to experience God, humanity, and the rest of creation along the way? So keeping in mind those three links, or those three relationships, which we're taught so beautifully by Pope Francis in Laudato Si. And then, of course, considerations like what mode of travel are you going to take? Again, what's your desired distance for the group that you have? Where are you going to be your rest breaks? Where can you find help if you need it, either medical or police? And then what locations, again, back to along the way, might offer opportunity either to stop and take an extra minute to pause with the rest of creation or with humanity that lives in that area, or is there a sacred site like we just heard about some national uh, uh, shrine sites? That's really awesome. So our San Bernardino example begins by us asking ourselves, why pilgrimage and why now? Okay, so this is Southern California. It's huge. Uh, And our answer is why now? Why pilgrimage? And for us, it's because we were invited. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so little purple star there, that's about where the Diocese of San Bernardino Planning Center is, or Pastoral Center is. Down here to the south, little pink star is about where the Diocese of San Diego is. And they had this great idea to invite us to meet them on November 16th at 12 p.m. for a mass on a Sunday. So that's great. We didn't have to think too much about why or when. Um, but we both groups had to discern what are the meaningful sites in our area and can we connect them in a pilgrimage route. And in this case, we had chosen walking. So the pink arrows that you see here are San Diego. And what this represents is an intentional decision to start at the border. We know that there's a lot of tension right now on the border, and people are living in the pain down there. And so starting right at the border is a really great way to expose people who don't get there very often or people who've never been there to what life is like down there. You see two solid arrows. They're going to walk for 2 days, overnights, basically in like church halls. And then the third day, kind of looking at that's 70 miles, and they only have 3 days. So on the third day, on that Sunday, they're actually going to drive to the meeting place. So what did that do for us in San Bernardino? Well, this Southern California is huge. So kind of looking at the big picture with the purple circle, that's about where we started looking for sites that we might be able to connect. This is kind of a representation of where all the churches and ecological sites might be and the places where we could stop and use the restroom. And so for us, kind of switching, this ended up being what our pilgrimage kind of physically looks right now. And basically, we have two parishes in that area. They're both run by the same missionary order of priests, and they all know each other pretty well and work together. So that's kind of an easy unifying thing for us. But basically, if all goes as proposed here on the slide, and of course, no plan ever survives contact with reality, right? But hopefully, we'll start in Coachella at Our Lady of Soledad. We walk about 4 miles to a mission church that they have there, get a drink of water, maybe pray, walk another, 7 miles to the next parish, and then walk another, I think it's about 4 miles to where we hope to overnight. There's a plan for stargazing that night, so there's a little bit of a nature connection. We get up the next morning. Hopefully, the community sends us again. We have asked for a blessing at our starting point in Olida, at point number one, point number two, point number three, asking for blessings along the way. Then we get moving to a public site where there's also water, shade, and restrooms, and then onto a private site, same thing. And then hopefully, finally, the last day, we're there half an hour early, and we can join with the San Diego Pilgrims for Mass and celebration. And the pastor there's really excited about it, so that's helpful. Um, okay, this is a slide with a lot of words. Sorry about that. We have a running Word document. If you want the big list, we can send it to you. But basically, so now that we kind of have discerned our big picture of what we want to see along the way, where we think we can get help, then we start looking with more detail. And I've planned one or two kind of like overnight things for other people to try to share the experience of the Camino de Santiago. And what I've learned is if you're going to do something like this, you have to get out there and walk it yourself ahead of time, or bicycle. Or I think this year we're actually going to take out a drone and fly it over, looking for the best, so that we're not walking on busy roads or in places where people are going to get bit by rattlesnakes. But you got to come up with a meal and water plan. At the various churches, is a ministry willing to come in and cook dinner for you, or are you going to bring in Subway and invite them to come share your meal with them? Are permits and permission required along the way? That's kind of a big one. And then contingency planning. We hope to have a vehicle that follows us. That's our plan. Has all our stuff in us. We're not really going to hike with 20 pounds of stuff on our back. So like our sleeping bags are in there, a medical kit, and then somebody who can call or call if we need medical help or police help, or just if someone is tired or has blisters and needs to take a break for a couple of miles. No harm, no foul on that one. Celebration, and then a plan to get back to the starting point. back to the way itself, getting buy-in and getting permission. This is where we are really in both in San Diego and San Bernardino right now, where one by one we're talking to the parishes, to the pastors, trying to explain what we want to do, trying to invite them into the process, trying to make sure that they understand we believe this process is about them, because those of us that live kind of out west of the Salton Sea area don't get out there very much. You're driving through there on the way to Tucson or something else. And so this is an opportunity for us to experience. And actually, the lead pastor in our district was really excited and wants to provide some formation on what he calls the campesino culture out there and share with us how the people live and how they're very connected to Mexico and to some other Latin American countries. So for whomever gets to walk this, it'll be, I think, an experience of learning about the community and then also learning about nature out there. Packing list, I'm not going to go through this whole thing. There are really great packing lists from an organization called Modern Catholic Pilgrim and another organization called Commissioned by Christ. They do trips all the time, and this can help you make sure that you haven't forgotten something. I would say something that's different than this than just trip planning. Something that was really meaningful to me on the Camino de Santiago, and I've maintained it, is I sat down with a piece of paper and wrote down all my prayer intentions. Actually, I think I did it on a Word table so that I could add to it, but I still have that piece of paper, and occasionally I pull it out and read through it. You might want to take something like your Palm Sunday or a prayer card that you most like. There's a tradition on the Camino where you take a rock, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. And there's a point a few weeks into the Camino where everybody leaves their rock, and it's like leaving behind your sins, leaving behind your baggage, leaving behind all your doubts. Um, and it's called the Hill of Pardon. Really beautiful. So your group might want to have something like that they do. And then coming up with a plan for technology, because, for example, I love listening to audiobooks and podcasts, but if I'm there texting and Instagramming, maybe I'm not listening to God and listening to the rest of creation. Um, Okay, and then conducting the pilgrimage itself. I'm going to say pre-pilgrimage. Just like if you have a planning group, you're actually already doing the pilgrimage just by making these decisions and reflecting on them together. But a little bit of formation is great. Physical requirements, of course, you're going to. So if you have an opportunity to reach your pilgrims before day one, then certainly you want to let them know what the physical requirements are going to be, packing list, fitness expectations, and then also to sort of try to bring them into the spirituality of pilgrimage and of the Jubilee year, as well as certainly of Laudato Si, if they're not familiar with it. As you get close to pilgrimage, you're going to want a day or two where you're making a go decision. In a place like the Salton Sea, you can have windstorms come up, and so you might do all this great planning, and then you either have to change it to a different weekend, or you're just not going to be able to. You go inside instead. Um, and then as you go, adjusting the plan as necessary, and finding a way to engage people on the way. One example could be like you print out postcards, use recycled paper, repurpose other paper that maybe give a couple of insights as to why you're doing this, and even a QR code to some creation care resources that help people along the way understand who you are and why you're doing that. Ask them to pray for you. We learned that from Pope Francis, right? Always start with that. Please pray for me. And then post-pilgrimage, I would say, again, please try to round up your people. Maybe you'll be a permanent community, but at least one session together where you can start to process what you saw while you were out there, and then taking action. And really the sub question at the bottom, how can this become a lifelong journey? Okay, so that was the spicy one. One of the more mild pilgrimages, I'm just going to give you one more example from our diocese and really from our creation care ministry. And about 3 hours on Sunday afternoon, our diocese has really engaged in Jubilee, and we have Vespers over at the cathedral a couple times a month. And none of us are really that familiar with Vespers, but it's a beautiful ceremony that our diocese has gone through the trouble of putting together, and they're accompanying the worldwide schedule. So if it's the Jubilee of Youth, then our Vespers is the Jubilee of Youth over here. But so what we decided was, as a little bit of formation, well, first we got together and said, do we want to make this a pilgrimage? And can we call this a pilgrimage? What are the unifying elements? going outside and then using either the pilgrimage prayer or the pilgrimage song. In our case, we made a plan to go over there together, carpooling. It's really too far to walk in a short time, but we can carpool, right? Meeting outside at one of the fountain landscaped areas, and then praying through the Jubilee prayer together to kind of think about what does it mean to be a pilgrim and what has Pope Francis called us to do this year as Pilgrims of Hope. Then we went into Jubilee or into the Vespers, and then we talked about it again at our next meeting. So that's hopefully how we made this into more just attending Vespers, separately or together. And so main points, I guess I would say one thing I think is for me, pilgrimage has become just a way of demonstrating that our whole lives, hopefully as Christians, are meant to be a pilgrimage toward God, toward heaven. And so if the more I think about that, and walking is very spiritual for me. So when I walk, especially outside and especially, for exercise or whatever, I'm always thinking about how I'm connected to the rest of creation and how I'm trying to go toward God. That's been my lesson out of it. Keeping in mind the spiritual and physical aspects of your journey. And then you're going to have some individual growth. Hopefully you leave room for that as well as communal growth. Somehow you can come together. And again, the three main points of God, humanity, and the rest of creation. So I will finish with that.